Hey everyone, I'm Jared Samuels, and welcome to another episode of What's Behind the Game. You'll get an exclusive look at how all your favorite athletes eat, train, and anything else you'd like to know. Today we have Garrett Salpeter, who is the founder of NeuFit and the creator of the Neubie device. So welcome, Garrett.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Jared.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Heck yeah.
So my first question is, what is NeuFit? What is the Neubie device for those of us, or for those in our audience that may not know?
So we work a lot with athletes who are looking to recover from injury or surgery, and typically the ones that want to do it faster than the typical physical therapy schedule will allow. So that's one area is in rehabilitation and recovery, and then we also help athletes progress all the way along that pathway from early stage rehabilitation back into training, back into return to play, back into elite performance. And the reason we're able to help them throughout that whole continuum is this common thread of the nervous system. The nervous system controls so much about how we heal and recover from trauma, from injury, from surgery. And it also, of course, controls our movement, and it controls our hormones and how we respond to stress and our long-term health and our potential for athletic performance. And so everything that we do is built around testing and working with and tapping into the nervous system.
Mm-hmm. So I want to go back a little bit to your, through your background and like how you got to this point and working with the nervous system. And I remember reading something or seeing something that you played a lot of hockey growing up. Did that sort of that athletic background sort of lead you into this direction?
Yeah, totally. So as a hockey player, that was kind of my avenue into physiology and the human body and athletic performance, and I became really enamored with training, with performance, with the idea that I could actually change myself, that I could make myself into a better athlete and become either bigger or stronger or faster. And I had some frustrations along the way, but that passion always kind of stayed with me. And then I had injuries along the way too, and I was very frustrated. And at one point, I thought I might be a doctor or a physical therapist, but based on my experiences with the traditional system, I really saw nothing but dead ends for myself. I just wasn't interested in really participating in the more traditional stuff that I had seen. And then all that changed. Actually, really the catalyst was an injury. So it was one of those things where it was the silver lining. I had an injury and I was playing college hockey. I had some torn ligaments in my wrist. I was supposed to have surgery, be out for 3 months, and I ended up meeting a chiropractic neurologist and working with him and taking a functional and neurological approach to something that's traditionally thought of as just being structural and orthopedic. By taking this other approach, we were able to heal my ligaments in 3 weeks instead of 3 months. We were able to regenerate everything and avoid surgery altogether. It was just a really profound experience for me. And so that's what really set me on this path. In that experience, I just knew that this work, it really spoke to me, and I knew this is what I wanted to do, what I wanted to share with the world. I didn't really know what it looked like at the time, and that was 15 years ago now. But that was kind of the launching point for me.
So did you start out with the nervous system, or were you more on like the engineering side, or like what sort of brought these two fields together?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I kind of joke that I feel like I'm the luckiest person in the world because I found the one thing that allows me to take, kind of combine my two areas of knowledge and passions, where I have physiology and neuroscience, and then in parallel, in college, when I had this injury, I was also majoring in physics, and I was set to come down to here to the University of Texas in Austin, where we've met here in Austin, for graduate school in engineering. And so this has allowed me to kind of combine those things. So I have the passion for neuroscience, and the engineering allowed me to work with the engineers who actually did the sophisticated design for our device and the technology that allows us to do many of these things to assess and treat and train the nervous system.
Mhm. How long did it take from the idea that you had, like, hey, I want to work with the nervous system, to building the device? How long was that process?
So that was, I think the short answer, about 7 or 8 years. When I first started out, I had this experience. I ended up this experience with my own injury, and I ended up apprenticing with that doctor who was the first to expose me to a lot of these principles and techniques and earlier versions of direct current technology. That's one of the key differences, is direct current versus alternating current. And so when I met him, and that was kind of the catalyst. Right then, I trained with him. I ended up deciding to open a facility here where I had 150 square feet in the back of a chiropractic office, and that was 12 years ago. And the first few years of that, I was just applying the basics that I had learned from him and other mentors, using earlier versions of direct current. The methods kept getting better, the results and outcomes kept getting better, and I kept seeing these shortcomings in the technology that I was using before. And so it was this journey over the first 5 or 6 years of really realizing it, and then that 6 or 7 year time frame, decided, okay, I want to actually take this into my own hands and make new technology to improve upon the electrical stimulation, status quo. And then it was a couple of years of development work and getting through the FDA and all that stuff, and finally launched it. And now we've had the device out there for 2.5 years.
Wow, that's a long process. So when you finished the device, was there a lot of initial skepticism surrounding it? Did you have to, like, overcome that?
That's a great question, and I would say yes, and there still is. Many people, I think it's like any new technology. People were skeptical of the car back when they were really happy and content with the horse and buggy.
Mm-hmm.
And so when there's new ways of doing things, there's a healthy skepticism, and I think that skepticism is very healthy, because there's a lot of new things that come out that don't work, and people make claims that are bogus. And so I think that I never take it personally or fault anyone if they're skeptical of our work and our technology and what we're doing. All I ask is the opportunity to make our case and have people try it. And most of the time, the results speak for themselves, that people are convinced when they try it and see that it makes a difference for them. They often start to believe very quickly in what it can do. And we also understand that many people want to see the data, the research, the studies, and so we're working on those as well. We've got our first several studies going on right now. We have a lot of very compelling case studies, and between us and our network of practitioners have seen 50,000, somewhere between 50 and 100,000 patients and clients around North America. So there's a lot of case studies, a lot of very compelling evidence, and we're just refining that and getting more and more rigorous data out there as quickly as we can.
Right. Yeah, that helps the people that can't come in initially and use it to really see that it works, and then go into using it.
Yeah.
So this podcast is geared more towards young athletes, and I wanted to ask how a young athlete could use the device as a training tool. How could they do that?
Great question. So one of the biggest issues that I think young athletes have is that and this is something that if someone had told me, when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, I just would have said, whatever. But now knowing what I've learned and having the experiences that I've had, I know that one of the biggest problems is that we really we try to build fitness on top of dysfunction, is a good way of saying it, where athletes athletes skip steps. They don't first build the basic movement foundation that they need to support higher levels of skill. And so the interesting thing that one of the most interesting things that I've observed is that spending time working on the basics of movement and motor control and joint mobility and coordination, spending time on those basics really can have a significant long-term result. And so, so one of the things that we can do with our technology, for example, is a very cool and quick assessment where we can scan around on an athlete's body and identify exactly where there are any neurological dysfunctions or any problems and how, I think everyone listening probably knows it's the nervous system that controls the muscles. The muscles don't do anything on their own. They only do what they're commanded to do by those nerve signals, those electrical impulses. And so we can scan around in the body and find if there are any spots where that neurological messaging is off. And oftentimes just by doing that, even though it's thought of as more of like a rehab type of thing, it can actually have a profound impact on performance, because many times our bodies actually limit our own performance because our brains are oriented towards survival. Our brains care more about living to see tomorrow, care more about survival than they do about having a 40-inch vertical or running a 10-second 100-meter sprint or being able to throw a baseball 98 miles an hour. So our brains will actually limit us. They don't want us to do more. They want us to do less. They don't want us to move too far, move too fast, load too much, because there's a risk of injury. And so one of the biggest things that our brains do is limit us. We can find where those limitations are being imposed. And oftentimes that leads to actually, even though it sounds like it's a longer process to go back to the beginning and build that foundation, sometimes because we're able to find the actual problem, that leads to immediate breakthroughs. And so sometimes there's low-hanging fruit, so to speak, where we can help someone get more performance almost immediately. And then, so that's kind of one way. And then, beyond the device, I think some of the methods that we use to teach the basics of position, to teach, one of the most important things we can do is learn how to fall, for example. So learning how to step off of a ledge and catch ourselves in a squat or lunge position or something like that, being able to absorb force. If you, Jared, if you're capable of jumping 40 inches in the air, but your brain only thinks you can safely land from 26 inches, your brain's only gonna let you jump 26 inches. And so if you learn how to land from 40 inches and higher, then your brain will take off those governors, or will stop limiting you, and it will allow you to express that full vertical jump height.
Yeah, so just when you talk about performance, so this is, is it strength, is it quickness, is it all of this together, just general performance?
In terms of like what we focus on?
Yeah, or just in terms of where you're seeing improvements with these athletes.
Yeah. So, strength and speed and power are really our neurological skills. And so if we want to jump higher or run faster or throw harder, it really comes down to the nervous system. And one of the limiting factors, for example, biggest limiting factor in speed. So if you want to run faster or move more powerfully, the biggest limiting factor on that is the speed of the nervous system and how quickly it can send signals. And it's really interesting that a lot of times we think it's how quickly we can contract, and that's important. But even more important is how quickly we can relax the opposing muscles. So if I'm trying to throw like this, if I'm trying to throw contracting my tricep, my bicep is resisting that. Instead of a smooth movement, which would look something like this, and my bicep's resisting, my bicep is resisting along the way, and it gets kind of jerky like that. And so really the ability of those muscles to relax and lengthen is the limiting factor on speed of movement. And so special techniques that we have where we do very quick eccentric loading, like that dropping and landing from in a squat or lunge. Other techniques where we catch weights are things. And then with our device, we can train very specifically that ability of muscles to lengthen as well. So we can program that in, so we get the equivalent of multiple workouts worth of that signal and that work in just a few minutes.
Mm-hmm. What about if I'm a young athlete listening to this and I'm recovering from an injury? How can this device, and we talked a little bit about it, the nervous system function, just in general, you doing a general intake appointment. What about if I have an injury? How does it help there?
So that's a great question. I mean, that was the catalyst for me really learning about these principles, and as I shared my experience, earlier versions of this, even without many of the improvements we've made in the techniques and the technology, earlier versions of this still allowed me to get back, over 2 months ahead of schedule from my wrist injury, and allowed me to avoid a surgery. And so I can speak not only from certainly from personal experience, and also from the experience of having seen thousands of people here and tens of thousands around the world recover faster using this. So we have, for example, here in Texas, high school football is a big deal. So the Friday Night Lights games, high school football games, we've had many players now who sprain an ankle, for example, in that Friday night game, and they're supposed to be out for 3 to 4 weeks. And we've had several that'll come in for 2 treatments on Saturday, 2 treatments on Sunday, 2 treatments on Monday, and they'll be back practicing Tuesday or Wednesday, and they'll play in the game the next Friday. So instead of missing 3 or 4 weeks, they miss 3 or 4 days. They don't miss a single game, and they're back out on the field and able to contribute to their team winning. I mean, sometimes playoff games or state championships.
Wow. Yeah, that's quick. How long is a general session, just in case someone wants to come in? When you say
usually that first evaluation is about an hour. Follow-up visits usually 40, 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, you have a document on your website called the 5 biggest flaws in exercise, and I'm sure we've hit on a couple of them, talking about how it can improve a young athlete's performance. Can you talk a little bit about maybe any more flaws you see in exercise, and how the device and how your work helps with that?
Yeah, for sure. That is, I definitely would welcome people to go. That report is on our website. It's www.neu.fit, neu.fit. And that, I think is, or at least I hope, is an interesting read. One of the issues is that we often think that we're going to play differently than we practice, and there's a great saying that we don't rise to the level of our dreams or expectations, we fall to the level of our training. Mm-hmm. So we're only as good as we train ourselves to be. And in that conversation comes up the importance of specificity, that we're neurologically we're adapting to exactly what we're doing. And so if we're just going through the motions, if we're not putting in our effort, if it's not stimulating or challenging enough, then we're not going to get the outcome that we want. And so that's one of the biggest issues, is that oftentimes the work that we do is not stimulating or challenging enough. And that's where we have to think neurologically. It's ultimately the target of training is our brain. Our brains need to learn to activate more muscle, to coordinate our movements so they're faster and more powerful. And so the training that we do has to be stimulating enough so the brain actually gets the point that something happened and it's time to adapt, and it's time to, so good things to look for example, if the brain is getting the message, then it's going to trigger the recovery process. You're going to have a greater appetite. You're going to be sleeping well. You're going to have these good hormonal releases, where you might have a higher sex drive. Those are all good signs that your brain is actually stimulating you to recover and adapt to your training. And that's something that using the device allows us to get so much more significant and precise neurological input, so we can help people get those results faster. And then in terms of specificity, there's also some interesting conversations around, like, for example, imagine you're on a football team, and your coach is having you run sprints at the end of practice, and you're running one length of the field, 100 yards, rest, run 100 yards back. You're doing that 10 times. So there's specificity in terms of training for speed, for endurance, for strength, for muscle size, and so the training, our response is always going to be a response to a certain type of training. So if you're really tired and you're running to the point where your speed and your form break down, you're actually adapting to running slower and with worse form. And there might be some endurance benefit to that, but there can actually be some downsides. So that's one of the things that I personally struggled with when I was an athlete, is that I just wanted to do more. So I thought that was going to be my ticket to get ahead. And
right. Working harder rather than working smarter.
Exactly. And so I had to learn that it's not just more, but it's quality over quantity. And so once the speed breaks down, 5 to 10%, when you can no longer get within 5% of your maximum speed, if you're trying to train speed, that's the time when you should stop running. You should rest until you can do it again, or call it for that day or that session until you can recover and come back again, because you don't want to adapt to getting slower. And so that's one of the things that I did, specificity wise. My endurance got great, but I still wasn't as fast as I wanted or needed to be. And that was, ultimately the biggest ceiling on my hockey career. And I just certainly didn't discover any of this stuff in time. But the other thing I did, I trained a lot of endurance over speed, and I also trained a lot of strength over speed. So I, at one point, was much more muscular, and that's because I thought that the key to all of it was getting in the gym and lifting heavy. And so I got really strong, but that also didn't translate to speed. Remember, not just how fast you can contract, but how fast you can relax. And so moving heavy weights really slowly, if you do too much of that, that can also detract or take away from speed. So I think that notion of specificity in terms of being stimulating enough and where you're focusing your training is one of the biggest takeaways. And as I look back on my own experience as a young athlete, one of the biggest things that I wish I had known.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all great information. I'm curious, do you, like, if a basketball player comes in, are you working on maybe their ability to shoot quicker? Like, are you working on that motion with the device, or is it all about just the general ability to move quicker that'll then translate to shooting more quickly?
That's a great question, and ultimately it's both. We're working on the foundational movement patterns that will translate there, and then we also will go through specific movements with the machine on, whether it's a golf swing or a basketball shot or a sprinting stride. We'll be doing, or a swimming stroke. We'll be doing those movements with the machine on as well. So we'll do both general and specific movements. And we want to do them in the right positions with the right speed for the right amount of time, and get all that stuff, all those variables as dialed in as possible, so we can just get the most bang for the buck. If you're going to come in and do the work, if you're going to pay the time and spend the time and pay the money and do it, you want to have the results to show for it.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, where do you see this go? I was looking on the website, and you're working with, it looks like the Cubs and some other, I saw Trent Dilfer did a testimonial. Where do you see this going ultimately?
So in the sports world, we're working with 8 to 10 major sports teams, like in the NBA, the LA Clippers are using it, and they're one of the definitely most skilled teams right now, and so we're being able to help their guys stay healthy. Major League Baseball, we got to work with the Washington Nationals last year on their way to the World Series, and several other players have loved it. And Anthony Rendon, for example, was a guy that he was their star third baseman, just signed a mega free agent deal this year. He bought his own device, so that he could take it with him to the new team, although the Angels ended up getting one also for the team. So getting in with more teams and some universities like here, University of Texas, Ohio State, a few others are using it. So it's pretty good to have some early momentum there. Certainly would like to do some more work in the sports world. And then we're also doing things like you and I, how we met is through Team Luke and Brain Injury,
Mm-hmm.
A very great organization that helps people and families of people who have brain injuries. And so, we're doing a lot of work in that realm, helping people with brain injuries and MS. And again, it's just because that common thread is the nervous system. The same thing that controls recovery and athletic performance also controls, of course, recovery from a brain injury or a stroke or a spinal cord injury. And so we're trying to push these fields forward. And I still am very frustrated with the traditional physical therapy and traditional orthopedic medicine.
Right.
We're able to help people avoid surgeries and recover faster just by going really to the source of the problem or the biggest opportunity to make an impact. And so for us, really, it's about shifting the dialogue to the nervous system and really help shift people's focus onto more of what really matters.
Great. Well, there's a final question we always ask, and it's, what are your top three? You went through a ton of recommendations, but if you could give 3 recommendations for young athletes, what would those be?
Ooh, good question. Top 3 recommendations for young athletes. So I would say one is, first of all, is build a foundation of overall health, where if you're not sleeping and eating right, if your body can't keep up with the stresses of daily life, there's no way in heck you're going to maximize your potential on the athletic field or in the gym or in training or in any competition. So I would say you have to put your health first, and that means going to bed earlier for many young athletes, making good, responsible food and nutrition choices. It can mean different things for different people, but that's one I would say is put your health first. I would say also number 2 then would be do things in order, as in, if you're trying to throw a pitch, for example, but you don't have enough external rotation in your shoulder, you can't get back there. You're going to be trying to compensate around that. And so making sure that you have, for example, the prerequisite motion at all the joints that you need, or that if you're sprinting or skating, you have to be able to absorb a lot of force on one leg. So being able to do single leg balance and stability and strength work. So building the foundation first, and then number 3, I'd say once you're doing the right things health-wise, and once you have the right movement patterns down, then I would say number 3 would be to train as hard as you can, and remember to stop training when you can no longer train as well as you can. So think about training as this like a bell curve or an upside down U. So if if you're not working hard enough, you're down here. Once you get up, you're at the peak. This is where the magic happens. When you're actually training at your best possible ability or within 5% of that. And then if you do too much and you're fatigued and you keep going, you fall down to the other side. And so, not doing too much past the point where your quality is broken down, that's where it's time to, either take a few minutes and rest and try again, or cut it off for the session and come back next time. So, certainly a skilled coach can help you with that, but so many even coaches want to try to run people into the ground and sacrifice quality in the name of quantity, and that's the not a winning recipe. Yeah,
no, that's great advice, because I think a lot of younger athletes, they immediately try to do the Tiger Woods, hit 1,000 golf balls, just an arbitrary number, because they see some pro athlete does it, but in reality that may not be nearly as effective as hitting 100 really good ones and then taking a break. So that's great advice. So where can people, you mentioned the website, where can people find out more about you?
Yeah, website's a good place, www.neu, like neurological, new.fit. And then also on social media, we're most active on Instagram. Search NeuFit RFP for Rehab Fitness Performance. You'll see our logo. For those of you who are watching instead of listening, you'll see our logo pop up on there. But that's, we share content on a virtually daily basis and interact on there. I'd love to connect with you on social media.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett. It's been a pleasure.
Great.
It's great to see you.
Great to see you too.